My name is Nathan DeLong. I'm a sales engineer here at SalesPad, and today we're going to be going through data collection in SalesPad, and specifically as it relates to receiving. So data collection is really a helpful tool to integrate your warehouse operations with your order fulfillment process in SalesPad desktop. Specifically when it comes to receiving, I think that a lot of the considerations that we think of are, what do we do when it comes to receiving inspection and how can we accommodate that? How does our put away process look? What happens when we start looking at storage locations? So where should we put product when we've gone ahead and received it? What do we do as far as over-receiving? Are we going to allow, for example, a receiving inspector to receive more product than what was ordered on a purchase order? Are we going to prevent them from doing that? And then are we going to be using bins in our warehouse environment? Of course, with data collection in SalesPad, we have the option to allow bins, but that's not required. So we do allow it, but it's going to come down to a decision about whether or not that will serve you well in your environment or not. So as an example of an effective receiving process, I always think it's important to have a specific queue established in SalesPad desktop for orders that have associated purchase orders. So for example, in SalesPad desktop for myself, of course, I have a waiting for product queue that's been created. And in that waiting for product queue, I know that any orders that are sitting in there have an associated purchase order, and that's very helpful. Again, one of the ways that SalesPad can really help with inventory management is by providing visibility. So breaking out a specific queue to have your orders that have associated purchase orders can be very helpful in keeping an eye on those and making sure that we're monitoring those with our vendor to make sure that we have product coming in when we expect it to. Now, another thing that I think that's important is to have a specific bin established for receiving. So in my environment in SalesPad desktop, I do have a bin that I've created. We can even go ahead and take a look at that here if we go into our warehouse configuration. And then here's my warehouse location, and you'll notice I have a specific bin here that's been created for receiving. So by default in my demo environment, what I like to do when I'm receiving product is to always receive it to my receiving bin, so that way it can be inspected, it can be checked in a more organized manner, but yet we can still bring it in and get the truck hopefully going on to whatever their next stop is, not hold them up too much because of our internal processes. Now, one possibility that you can always use too is receiving workflow in SalesPad data collection. That is really going to come into play if you happen to have a situation where maybe you're bringing product from overseas, and what you're really doing is you're checking on the status of that product with your freight provider or whoever the shipping company is. So you might have queues that are set up in data collection and you're receiving in workflow for things like 1 week out, 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, and you're manually moving those purchase orders through that sort of a receiving process. It's a little bit more manual, but again, it does provide visibility if that happens to be something that you're dealing with. And then the last thing I think that's important with receiving is to make sure that you're leveraging barcodes as much as possible. And that's a place where SalesPad data collection really does shine. It really does provide some value as far as allowing you to utilize barcodes throughout your warehouse management activities. In this case, when we're doing receiving, we can go ahead and use a barcode to bring in the PO number. If our vendor's been kind enough to actually send us a copy of our purchase order that has a barcode on it, we can scan that so that we're working on the right document. We can also, of course, scan the barcodes that are on the items that we're receiving in, and we can use our security settings within SalesPad data collection to force our folks out in the warehouse to actually have to scan in order to increment the quantity that they're receiving. So if we have times where For example, we're bringing in product and we want to make sure that every one of those items is counted as accurately as possible. We can have it so that you actually have to scan each individual item in order to bring that into inventory. And of course, for complex lot numbers or serial numbers that have to be entered, we can use barcodes to scan those as well. And it's a great way to avoid keying errors, which can always lead to some discrepancies or problems down the road if those wind up working their way into our data by the time we go to, say, actually fulfill that serial tracked or lot tracked item. We might discover that in fact we had some keying errors that are causing us to now have problems when the customer calls later on about that item that they received, or so on and so forth. So the last thing to remember before we go ahead and get started with the actual demo of data collection for receiving, data collection is directly integrated into your GP database. So it's going to respect the workflows and the business rules that you've set up in SalesPad. And there's no syncing that's required. So between my handheld device, in this case I have an iPod Touch that has a sled on it so that I can scan barcodes, there's no syncing required to get from this to my GP database. But what is going to be important is that you must have Wi-Fi connectivity throughout your warehouse in order to make the most of data collection. For this device to work, it does need to be connected to Wi-Fi. And able to talk to SalesPad and of course to GP. Without having that connection, we're not going to be able to utilize this. So it's just something to keep in mind. And I suppose that one other thing that we could always talk about too is that with that Wi-Fi connection, we default to using port 5501, but that can be configured during implementation. So if you have another port on your server that you would prefer that this traffic travels over, you can go ahead and do that. And I suppose the last thing to remember is we really have three components with data collection, and those are going to be the mobile device here. Then over here we have data collection, in my case I'm using data collection extended warehouse. That really just gives me a couple additional functions, but this data collection console, which is basically responsible for running the service that allows our devices to talk to our database. And we do also have a web service. So in my demo environment, I only have one scanner that's attached to data collection. Now that means that I'm using then the Windows service to manage the traffic between my mobile device and my GP database. Now, if I run into a situation where I have maybe 10 or 15 or more mobile devices, we're probably going to want to look at installing the data collection service actually as a web service using IIS. The reason for that is simply because it's going to act a little bit faster and be a little more efficient than using the Windows service. And normally that cutoff is right around 5 mobile devices. Once we start exceeding that number, we're really going to want to probably run this as a web service to make sure that everybody who's working with their mobile devices out in the warehouse has the least lag and the best performance out of the application. So let's go ahead and get started with looking at SalesPad data collection. And again, in my case, extended warehouse edition. You see here that on my laptop, I do have my data collection server started. This console basically is just going to let me either stop or start that service. Again, if we're running it through IIS, then you would be using IIS to stop or start the service. But for me, I've only got one mobile device in my mobile environment, so I'm perfectly good with my Windows service. Now, if you are going to be using it as a Windows service, of course, you can use these buttons here to install this as a service. So in other words, it's going to start up as soon as the server starts up and be running as a Windows task in the background. In my demo environment, I have not installed it as a service simply because my demo environment happens to be running off of my laptop, and it doesn't make sense for me to have a bunch of stuff starting up as soon as I turn on my laptop. It's just going to be a little bit clunky for me. one thing that can be helpful when we're receiving is making sure that we have a good way to sort of coordinate or collate together the open orders that we have with our vendors, so our open purchase orders that we're actually receiving in at our dock, along with open sales orders that are waiting for fulfillment. And what I mean by that is we don't want to run into a situation where we have a purchase order that we're receiving, right? We bring in 100 widgets. We take those 100 widgets, we inspect them, we put them in a bin, we go through all of the time to get that accomplished, only to find out that we actually have an order for that very same product. So here in data collection, we do have a put away report. And what this put away report is really going to do, the put away report is going to show us our open purchase orders. So in this case, I have a purchase order 2113, and that's going to be for some air filters for Land Rover Discovery. I have 100 of those that are on order. And then down here, it's going to show me my back-ordered sales orders for this item. And it's actually going to arrange those in ascending order by the requested ship date. So in other words, if I receive this purchase order 2113, I know that really I should be holding back 25 of those, not bothering to take them all the way back to the warehouse, put them away in a bin, because I actually need those right now to fulfill these back orders. And you'll see as you go through, it'll show that purchase order. If there's no back ordered documents, of course that will just be blank. But anytime we do have a purchase order that has some product on it, which is back ordered on some sales orders, those are always going to be given to us right down below, so they're easy to find, and they will be arranged again in ascending order based on that requested ship date. So in that case, we might say on this purchase order 2096, if I receive that as a partial from my vendor, so say that I only get maybe 50% of what they're supposed to send me, I know that if at all possible, I should probably use that product first for these orders that have a requested ship date that's the oldest. So I would want to start on my one that was supposed to ship in August, probably before I worry too much about the one that was requested in September, for example. So again, the whole purpose of this put away port is just to avoid wasting time. And it is going to be most effective if you are utilizing requested ship dates when you're placing your sales orders in SalesPad. Another thing that we can do right here from the data collection console that goes back to the sort of our overall topic for this quick video on receiving is we do have the ability to print our item labels. So if we're running into, say, a particular purchase order, and in this case, I'm going to go ahead and pull up 2094 and pretend that that's the one that's just come across my dock. If I go ahead and pull that up, I can see that I've got some items that are incoming on it. I could even have items that I've already received. It's perfectly fine to do it that way too. But it's going to then allow me to go ahead and print my barcode labels for those items on that purchase order, so I can then maybe affix those to those cartons that I've just received in. We do also, in this demo environment, we have something set up called smart printing. And really what that's going to cause to happen is our item labels are going to print automatically as soon as we confirm receipt of our purchase orders. So in my demo environment here, I would probably only be using this print item labels function if for some reason the labels that are on something in my warehouse got damaged. So maybe the fork on the fork truck just grabbed the edge of the box, ruined my barcode labels. I could go in here and I could reprint those. But otherwise, in my demo environment, as soon as we receive a purchase order, it's actually going to prompt us to then print those barcode labels, or they're automatically going to print out for us. So just to take a look at how this all goes together, I'm going to hop into SalesPad Desktop really quickly and issue a purchase order. So let's go over to our purchasing tab, and then let's go to our vendor search. And any of you who are already familiar with using SalesPad, you'll know these steps. If this is a little bit unfamiliar to you and you're not just watching this video to get some more information on data collection, but in fact you're watching this because you would like some more information on SalesPad Desktop, I would definitely encourage you to look at our other videos that go through SalesPad Desktop from end to end to get some more information on how this works. I'm not going to be spending a lot of time in this particular video going through exactly how SalesPad Desktop works, so just so you're aware of that. But let's go ahead and pull up a vendor. I'm going to use this Burnett Travel Associates here, and we're going to go ahead and open up a new standard purchase order. So let's go grab that. And it'll be just 1 second while that loads for me. And then let's go ahead and order some backpacks. Now, as you know in SalesPad, I don't necessarily have to know the exact item number in order to add a line item on a purchase order. I'm just going to type in part of the description and let SalesPad help me find the item. In this case, it looks like my actual item number for those is backpack 01. So I'm going to go ahead and grab those, put that on there, and let's say we need 20 of those. Maybe I've looked at my purchasing advisor, or I've looked at inventory analysis in SalesPad, and I'm kind of getting the feeling that that's about how many I have to order here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab those, and I'm also going to put in my buyer ID. I have a rule set up in SalesPad Desktop just for myself that you can't place a purchase order without actually having a buyer ID. So let's go grab that, and then I'm just going to save this PO so we have a PO number that we can work from. And as soon as this goes ahead and saves, it looks like we've got purchase order 2130, which is perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and jump out of that, close that up, and then I'm going to go ahead and on my mobile device now, which again in my case it's an iPod Touch. Nothing really special about it other than it does have a sled on it. I believe this particular sled is a Honeywell, which allows me to do that barcode scanning if I need to. So we're going to go ahead and on our mobile device, let's go ahead and get our purchase order received here. So in any of these fields where we have a blank rectangle, that is basically data collection telling me that if I want to, I can go ahead and use the barcode scanner that I have on my device, on my mobile device, to scan in that information. Now, I will tell you that in this case, because we just cut our purchase order and we didn't print it out, I don't have a barcode for my purchase order number. So instead, I'm just going to tap the little triangle next to it. And here's my purchase order. If I had more open purchase orders, of course, those would all show up in this list. But in my case today, I only have one purchase order, the one we just placed. So I'm going to grab that. And now it's going to go ahead and ask me, what is my item number? Now, in this case, I can scan because I do have some barcodes that I've previously printed out. So let's go ahead and grab our item number for that backpack 01. Now, with quantity, there's a bunch of different ways that we can enter this. Well, there's 3. The first one is I'm going to be able to manually type in the quantity that I'm receiving. The next one is that I can go ahead and use my plus minus buttons here to increment that quantity 1 by 1 by 1 by 1. And then the third way, we can use our security settings in data collection to force our user to scan each item individually in order to increment the quantity. In this case, I am going to just go ahead and type in the 20 that we've ordered just like that. And then let's go ahead and say we're done there entering that. And then for our bin, I'm going to go ahead and actually receive these into a bin other than my receiving bin today. I'm going to pretend these backpacks, they look okay. I can let them go straight to a bin, and I'm actually going to scan a bin location. So let's go put them in, I think, 02A01. I think that'll work good. And there we go. At this point, we can enter a vendor document number if we need to. So if the vendor has sent me a packing list and maybe there's a particular number on that that I want to refer to this by, we can go ahead and enter that or scan that at this point. But in my case, I'm actually just going to go ahead and submit. And it'll take it just a second now to process that. But the nice thing is I'm not going to have to do any kind of manual syncing back and forth between my mobile device and what's happening in SalesPad. So it's going to tell me that it's fully received that. And as we saw pop up on the screen for just a moment, it looks like that's receipt number 1205. So if we go over here and hop into data collection, let's go look at our item lookup or our inventory lookup really quick. So if I go here now and I type in that item number for my backpack 01, we'll be able to see here that I've got in my warehouse location, I'm receiving 20 of these. So that's that receipt that we just did on our mobile device. Now, the next step that we should do on our mobile device is let's go ahead and confirm our receipt. So let's go ahead and get that pulled up here. So we're going to go to confirm receipt. It's going to ask us what receipt number. Again, this list here will pull back all receipts that I have that have not been confirmed yet. But in my case, we only have the one that we're working on right now. So I'll select it. It's going to ask me now what item number. Now, if I'm standing in front of those items, of course, again, I can go ahead and beep that item number in just like that. And then for quantity, this time instead of typing it in, I'm just going to go use my plus button to increment that quantity up, if it'll let me here. Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to type this one. There we go. And again, it's going to ask me about a bin number. This is where if I was moving it from my receiving inspection bin to a particular bin in my warehouse, that's where I can do that step now. But in my case, I'm just going to pick that same 02A01 again. I can insert a comment if I need to. So maybe if I want to say, maybe these items need to be repackaged or hot order, really whatever makes sense in your process to put as a comment on these receipts, you can accommodate that here. In my case, I'm not going to worry too much about having a particular comment, but I am going to go ahead and then submit that receipt confirmation. And you'll see it'll tell me on the screen there that my receipt is fully confirmed. And then right away, I have this window that's going to open on my laptop. And what this is in my demo environment, because I don't have a label printer connected to my laptop here in our demo, I've set it to instead print this to a PDF. So with it printing to a PDF, that's what's caused this window to open. So if you think of this window popping up, asking me what I want to save my PDF as, it's exactly like having a Zebra printer, say, out in the warehouse that now is printing 20 barcode labels for our backpacks. So we can go ahead and look too at the output from that PDF just to get an idea what the default item label looks like that you would get. Of course, it's something that's configurable. It doesn't have to have any particular format. But as we can see here, there's our backpack. We have pages 1 through 20. So that means because we received 20 backpacks, I'll have one label, one barcode label for each of those. And again, this label format that is basically what you get out of the box with data collection can be customized. So if you'd like to have your serial lot number, say, as a barcode and as a number, it can certainly be configured to do that. If you prefer a different font, if you prefer the things to be, these pieces of information to be on the report in a different order, that can all be configured. This is just the one that comes out of the box to give you something to start with. So we can go ahead and close that up. And I suppose the last thing to note is that now that we have confirmed our receipt of these backpacks, you'll notice that they still are in receiving when I look those up here in data collection. Now, the reason for that is that any transactions that we do in SalesPad and by extension in SalesPad data collection, any transactions that happen in there that are going to hit our books or hit our accounting, they need to be posted in GP. Now, I'll tell you, that's probably a good thing, right? GP is GAAP compliant. We don't want to do anything to endanger GAAP compliance. We want to have the right folks in GP to do posting because we want that final set of eyes on what's occurring in our system. Now, there are some third-party tools out there that will also do auto posting in GP for you, but in my demo environment, I do have it set up so that I'm going to go to GP, I'm going to post this transaction, and again, the reason why I'm doing that is because when we receive in 20 backpacks, in this case, those 20 backpacks have a value that's going to hit our books. And we need to post that to reflect that in GP. So that wraps up our receiving using data collection. The next video that we'll have is going to, of course, be how do we use data collection to work with inventory while it is in our warehouse. And we will also have a video in this series for fulfillment as well. I really appreciate the time that you've taken to watch this. Again, if you're not familiar with SalesPad in general, I would really recommend that you check out our other videos. And thank you for watching.